What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the GSD podcast. My name's Keating Cleveland. Of course, we have the executive director of OMES here, Steve Harp. Steve, how you doing, man?
Great. It's good to be here again.
Good. And of course, we have our guest for this week. Our guest is none other than the Secretary of Public Safety for the entire state of Oklahoma, Chip Keating. Chip.
Welcome, Chip.
Keating, Steve, thank you guys. What an honor to be here.
Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, of all people to talk to, of all the people that have a super cool job in state government, especially during a energy crisis, pandemic, health, name it, and then civil unrest.
He doesn't have too much going on right now. Yeah,
no. I mean, and if anyone out there in TV land has witnessed OHP in action, they report into Chip as well, and great men and women out there. Tell us what it's been like, man. What's it like to be you?
I'll tell you, it's an interesting day every day. If I could tell you what I think my day is going to look like tomorrow, it's subject to change. I think that's every day in this position. It's busy. I would have never dreamed in a million years when Governor Stitt asked me to consider doing this, which is, to me, the highest honor because of my background, my love and passion for public safety in Oklahoma. But I could not in a million years rewind the last 20 or so months and tell you this is kind of what we would have gone through. So it's been an eye-opening experience.
In terms of, just since you've been in the job and specifically with all the social issues that are going on, talk to us a little bit about, your position or DPS's experience with civil unrest, with protests, things of that nature.
Sure. Well, so my background, I was actually an Oklahoma State trooper in my earliest days of my career. When I graduated high school, I joined the Oklahoma Highway Patrol in 2001. And so I have a tremendous amount of respect for the men and women that do that job. They're extremely competent and extremely professional and very well trained. So obviously, we all watched really the troubling events unfold with George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I paid close attention to that initially because it really hadn't spread and it was isolated and contained in Minneapolis. But it quickly spread and took foot into really every state and every large city, even small towns. So May and June was a really interesting time. Unlike some of the other states that we continue watching, really a lot of troubled things occurring. Yeah. We've got a governor and a leader that understands the first priority of government is public safety. And law and order and due process is important. And I think the governor sitting as the chief executive right now really allowed me to execute his plan with the patrol and a lot of other agencies, a lot of cities, working with the Guard. We had to deploy them to make sure we maintain law and order. There'll be a time and a place, and it's occurring now, to talk about how we can be better in law enforcement, and it's clearly a conversation that needs to be had. But we can't have it by burning our cities down and looting, and the message is getting hijacked. And it's just our governor shares. We start with law and order, and then hey, we'll have a conversation. Let's see what's working. Let's see what's not working. What's working, let's do better at. What's not working, let's fix it.
So it's funny. So I've got to meet and know a lot of the officers, unfortunately, on the side of the highway a couple different times.
Yeah,
they're always great.
Sometimes right around the Capitol, too.
It's happened. Okay, I'll tell you a story real quick. I'll tell it myself.
This is a good one.
So I was getting used to driving around the Capitol complex. So for those out there, it's one big circle. And you can't get anywhere directly. You have to do this big circle. Well, there's stop signs, and there's 3 or 4 of them. Well, I'm on the phone, and it was Bluetooth, so my hands were good. I'm driving, and not used to. Right through a stop sign, right through another stop sign. I rolled 3 of them, and finally, officer pulls me over. He goes, "Hey, Well, actually, when he walked up to be clear, when he walked up to my car, he gets out and he does this. What are you doing?
What the heck?
Right. What are you doing?
Right.
And it was hysterical. And I don't want to give the name away because I love him. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
So I had to work through that, and I've met a few on the highway, but all of them great. Yeah. But how's their morale now? I mean, it would be tough. Like my dad was Georgia State Patrol when he got out of the Marines, and when we lived down there, and I can imagine what it's like to recruit right now and what they're struggling with.
Recruiting, like that's the thing. Like current highway patrol police officers, but like what does that look like recruiting officers too?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would be remiss by saying it wasn't. Morale is low everywhere in law enforcement nationally. It's low in Oklahoma as well. It does help morale, though, in Oklahoma that the men and women that selflessly put the uniform on, knowing they might not come home at night, still continue to do this job. But I think the men and women do it because they know leadership has their back.
Yep.
And if they're doing what's right, they will always have their back. Now, if they don't do what's right, we're not going to cover up for you, and you're on your own. So the morale piece is something that's very tricky right now that I struggle with talking with numerous of our directors. It's an issue. Right now, we're not currently the largest law enforcement state agency is the Oklahoma Highway Patrol by numbers. We just graduated an academy of 61 brand new troopers back in July, and that's a big win. We haven't recruited. That academy was going on when the civil unrest started. We have not started recruiting for a new academy because we don't know when that'll be just yet. But, it'll be interesting to see what those recruitment efforts look like. I've been intrigued with seeing what Houston's doing, their chief of police, and I think it makes some sense. There are a number of big cities in the nation that the morale is not just low, it's horrible. And people are leaving in droves.
So walk us through that, because I saw a headline come across in Houston where their chief is actively recruiting. Hey, if your city doesn't support you, Houston does, and
they're doing a modified academy, like instead of a typical 20-week, whatever Texas's rules are. If you're commissioned in another state, they're going to have kind of a bridge academy of a 10-week to get familiar with the laws of Texas, the city laws in the city of Houston, and so. I think they just announced that they're going to start doing that. Look, men and women don't go into law enforcement to get rich. That's not what they go to law enforcement to do. It's a call to duty. It's a call to service. Right. I view it similar to being in the military. It's a real badge of honor. And so you've got to have a certain calling to go into law enforcement. And the men and women that are fleeing a lot of these cities aren't fleeing law enforcement. I think that's still their calling, but they're fleeing failed leadership. Sure. I mean, it's hard to go to work and do something in a job if your leader doesn't have your full support around what you're doing. And so I think that they'll be overwhelmingly successful in Houston. I mean, Texas is even businesses are leaving. It's not just law enforcement. Right. Businesses are fleeing these cities as well.
Look at California.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's a real, the governor's top 10 vision, I mean, this is where it's an opportunity for us to really get some unbelievable talent into Oklahoma that otherwise wouldn't have been here. Right. So when we're ready to do another academy, that is something we've looked at and thought about is, hey, I'd love to have seasoned guys that want to come to Oklahoma and get retrained on our processes here and our laws, but that have some real on-the-job experience. Boy, that's a big win. Otherwise, in a year or two ago, you wouldn't be able to do that. It'd be harder to recruit to Oklahoma.
Exactly. But if we get the ability to do that, talk through what it looks like to set up an academy, even if it's a modified academy, because that takes a lot of effort, right?
Yeah, they've looked at that. I don't know that we would do the modifications that some of the municipal agencies are. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol is very different. Even the OSBI, OBN, some of the other agencies in the state, they're typically out on their own. And so some of the training that is the more we train, the better we'll be. And the more we'll avoid the George Floyd, heaven forbid, those kind of incidents. Right. But training becomes repetition, it becomes memory. And that's a big thing in law enforcement. People forget you always train to live. Sure. And you constantly have to train because tactics change, laws change, and frankly, society changes. And so being your father, a state trooper in the 60s, 70s, I don't know the exact 70s, very different time frame, than today being a state trooper in 2020. Very difficult job, lot of scrutiny. Just assume everything you're doing is being recorded at least once, if not 10 times. Yep. And you have milliseconds to make decisions a lot of times in life. So in law enforcement, we don't get a chance to get it wrong. It has to be right every time.
You brought up training. Just out of your curiosity, get your thoughts. There's a lot of conversation around, more training, or change training. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit? Like, what does that
Sure.
look like? You mentioned it earlier. What does that look like for the
I think
future?
probably the biggest training component that's a real opportunity for us is around mental health.
Okay.
Mental health has really become a challenge for law enforcement. You think about, okay, as a law enforcement officer, you have to be an officer of the law, and that means a lot of things. But you also have to be, you have to be a marriage counselor.
Yeah.
You have to be a mental health expert.
Right, sure.
You have to be a negotiator.
Yeah.
You got to be split second on your toes at all times.
Yep.
You have to be a role model. I mean, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And so one thing that, we probably could really do a lot better job at on the training front is on the mental health side, as we're seeing. And I think I have a lot of discussions. I actually just came from a meeting here talking about curriculum and what we're doing what's our mandated curriculum for you to qualify to be a certified law enforcement officer in Oklahoma. We got to dream big and think differently because one of them right now, we're not doing near enough on the mental health side of things. And it is a lot of the calls where things could get go from a normal situation to an elevated situation pretty quickly. And if you at least have a way to identify that there's a mental health issue, well, you're going to treat that person very differently, right? If they're suffering from mental health versus a bad guy, a bank robber, it's a very different way you would deal with that person, talk with them, de-escalation techniques. A lot of different things. And so those are the conversations that are happening right now, and tactics and what we do. And it's important. I really think that's a big thing we got to focus on.
I think it's great that you guys are focused on it because honestly, I think my oldest daughter's 22. She's a TU law student. And she's really focused on mental health. That whole generation is. It's like the biggest thing, biggest issue for them. And it's interesting because I'm 52 and growing up, we never talked about it, right? I mean, it wasn't prevalent. It wasn't something. I think it's great that not just. I'm sure it's more than just the officers, at DPS, but it's amazing that you guys are focused on it. I think OMES needs to focus on it more.
100%. And honestly, mental health, not just for the public that you're going to interact with,
for the officers.
Mental wellness
100%.
for the officers as well. Because
like that. That's good.
Chief Gibson, Todd Gibson at Moore, the governor and I were with him last week at a round table, and he showed a very powerful video, body cam, of one of his officers dealing with a missing child who happened to have a child of her own, same age, and the trauma. We watched the whole situation with the missing child, and the child drowned. That mental health side of that, the mental wellness side of that, you think about an officer, they've got to go to that call, and then they've got to go in the officer world, 10-8 means in service.
Right.
You come off that call, you're going to the next call. And so that family just suffered trauma, and it's going to last with them a long time. Well, the officer participated in that trauma as well. It might have 2 or 3 other traumatic events in one shift.
That's crazy.
That officer has to deal with. And over time, we're human beings. Police officers are not robots. We're human beings, and we have feelings. And the mental wellness side of law enforcement is another thing I take very particularly a big interest in. And before the governor asked me to do this, I mean, I started and put my own money into a foundation for mental wellness for law enforcement officers because it's something we're just expected in law enforcement. And I've been there just to wear this big, strong kind of, hey, you got to be tough.
Move on, yeah.
You got be tough and deal with it and move on. But we're humans. You need a shoulder to cry on and process through to get that trauma out of your life. It's not that you will be able to remove it. You got to cope with it.
And part of that's like you talk about the increase in mental health training, but that's not just setting up the training from the start. That's a continual investment in throughout a career, correct? Of
100%.
the wellness and the mental health side of it.
And I would start when the new recruit of officers, the younger generation. We've got to do a better job of saying, hey, you guys are expected to know the law, look good, and look tough, and you got to be in shape and this and that, but you're also human beings. Yeah. You've got to know when you take that uniform off and that badge off, when you go home at night and you're a husband and you're a dad and you're a father and you're a son and everything you are with that uniform off, you can't bring that home. Because what I really don't want to see, and it's prevalent in that business, is high substance abuse, high divorce rate.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
Heaven forbid, suicide It's a real issue, though. And so because they're holding on to things, and over time it just boils over. And so we got to start on the front end where we're really training these people to be humans. And, hey, if you feel like you're building up come talk to someone.
Right.
Let's talk through it, because there are ways to prevent this. We have officer assistance programs that are highly effective. But, everything comes back to funding. And it costs money to do these things. And this is where, as a private sector guy, I see that vacuum and that void. And sometimes we, as people, we can't just rely on government. We got to help our own people.
Absolutely.
And that's something that tugs at my heart. I'm just passionate about the lifestyle side of these men and women. We all know and are grateful we get to go home and sleep in our beds at night. And if something happens, we dial 911. We expect someone to show up to help.
Right.
We know what law enforcement is there to do. But I want to help them when they go home and lay their head on their pillow at night to be human beings and be good dads and a good spouse.
That's cool.
So I want to change gears a little bit. Let's get into Real ID.
Yeah.
Talk to us about where that's at, what status is. I know you hit a big milestone, so let's get into that.
We did. So, Real ID is, Steve and I we got to know each other right out the chute on this thing when you were at DOC. Real ID was the governor's, I think, one of the big projects he saw that he wanted to get right coming in day one. And so, we've got a big get it done mentality. I think the whole administration, working together across agency lines.
Right.
Throw away identities. Let's all work together and don't say no, say yes. Let's have a get it done mentality. So we kind of did a mission control setup on Real ID. So there are a lot of entities that touch this, not just DPS, obviously, OMES and OneNet, a lot of different entities and IDEMIA. Bringing everyone in the room, we got to have a mission control, kind of like the first man on the moon. And we set out, hey, guys, let's be careful. If you're going to say you're going to deliver this milestone, we're not going to miss.
That's right.
So you better own what you can deliver. So we set out our timeline. COVID hit. We were supposed to be issuing statewide first part of May. We got delayed because of COVID and shutting things down. But I'll tell you, I was a little worried about what that delay would look like, because early on when COVID hit, Homeland Security hadn't given an extension. We were always operating to October 2020. Federal buildings, TSA, you got to have a Real ID. And I thought, oh my goodness, boy, this is going to be tough, because our DL locations were shut down. So it's one thing to get implemented on the tech side and the build.
Right.
Then you got to go
do it
right out the bat. You got to get 600,000 day one that don't have passports through in a very short amount of time. And it was nervous, but we were Real ID compliant. Don't hold me to this, around July 1st, give or take a couple days. And then as recently as today, we are submitting a letter to the Department of Homeland Security that we are fully compliant with all the check marks. And this is, it's a big build, as you know,
it's
Steve.
Huge. Yeah.
It's just a lot of different things touching each other. And we had old legacy mainframe systems in the state that complicated it even further. We did get an extension, but I told the governor we're not telling anybody we got the extension from Homeland Security. Everybody knows now, October 2021, because I didn't want anybody to take their foot off the gas.
No,
so,
that's great.
We got some building. So we're there. We're issuing Real ID now. I don't have the exact count. We're kind of looking at high volume to low volume, and that's how we're implementing across all our tag agencies and then our 34 DL locations.
It's been an amazing experience. So Chief Scully's done a great job. He's got Commissioner Scully, Chief Mays. Both great guys. Talked with Chief Mays yesterday a little bit about this.
Yep.
It's been interesting because you've been around longer than I have, but when you get in the state government and everyone's got walls up and everyone, this is my piece of the pie or whatever, between the work like with DPS, with DOC, it's been amazing. There's a lot of great individuals over there, a lot of great talent.
Yeah.
And there's no lack of anyone that really wants to just roll up their sleeves and do this. And it's been a big project. I wish we had like the officers wear like these body cams. I wish we, some of the people involved in these projects had body cams so you see what goes through, do a time lapse video so people. It's a massive undertaking.
Wow.
Massive, yeah. And there is so much talent around the state that I honestly, the thing I love about really just the synergy of what's going on right now, all that talent's being exposed. I mean, if you find a rock star, let's find a way to get them to work. And some of these agencies in the past, I feel like people have just kind of been shoved away and they just get through a routine.
Right.
Yeah.
But now, crossing across the agencies, like you said, it's unreal. Everyone working together,
Right.
the work that's going on at DOC, pardon and parole, that work, we did the largest commutation in U.S. history, the governor did, and pulling
Super
that
cool.
off.
I'm getting goosebumps while you're talking. I mean, it was super
There's no
cool.
way that could have happened without
Right.
that collaboration between those two entities. And that's a prime example of how we're better together versus divided.
Yeah, that's
and in the
good.
past, I think the culture in the past was your point. This is my piece and this is my piece, and
Right.
you just kind of stay in your little area, in your siloed area. So breaking down these artificial barrier walls has been remarkable, but people make the difference. You've got to put the right people in the leadership positions, and they will get it done.
And to everyone's credit, this is going on during a time where we don't have the revenue. I mean, literally, we're seeing, COVID, we're seeing drops in the energy sector. I mean, there's, it's not like the budgets are just overflowing.
Yeah, right.
So, literally, and people are willing to do it. So I don't, when I came into this from the outside world, you hear these stories about you just won't have that much talent at the state. You're not going to find that much talent. And that's absolutely not true.
That's false.
I think in some cases, either we had bad leadership or I think what the governor's done very well is bring in guys like you, Secretary Ostro. He's brought in, I don't want to forget anyone, but Secretary Brown. All these guys that have this
Right.
passion just to get it done,
Yeah.
right?
John Budd's
But
another
relationship
great example.
people that see value in everyone, and whoever and whatever we need to leverage to get something done. It doesn't really matter if it's DPS, if it's DHS, OHCA. Shout out to Kevin Corbett; he's amazing as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people out there, and that's been what's cool for me because when I walked into this job, OMS was very regulatory, and we're not. So it's finally we're not now, but in terms of just being able to partner with your team. And one of my favorite people on the planet, and have been since I got in the state government as on the board over there at DOC, is Scott Crow.
Boy.
Scott Crow.
Unbelievable.
And here's the funny thing. What Scott doesn't know, I talk about him in every one of these things. So
Literally, we're counting, like, he's been mentioned in every episode so far.
I think so. I think that's right. So
We
it's
gotta
like,
have
it's like
him on now.
What we call those things, like Easter eggs. I
Yeah.
think the Easter egg is Scott Crow's name because he is amazing.
And it's interesting. You were at DOC when we went kind of through that crazy period of transition, and from an interim perspective, you got to have someone leading it right away.
Right.
When you lose your
That's
director, kind of unannounced,
Yeah.
and just
Especially-
happened quickly.
especially an organization,
At a
yeah.
board
Yeah.
meeting.
Yes, and I had spent, I think that was, in May or June, I can't even recall, of 19, but I had spent a lot of time with Scott as chief operating officer, but I knew something was really good about Scott. I just knew it. I had a lot of confidence in him, and so when everything happened, we got Scott in there, and Scott the next day got in to meet with the governor, and I just knew there's something about the humility he has, his humbleness, but he's a go-getter. But the way he does it that's the characteristic of a leader. I think he's inspiring. People want to be around him.
Yeah.
That's the kind of person we need to do. I think Scott's has one of the most difficult jobs in
I
state
agree- I
government,
agree with
if
that.
not
with
the
that.
most difficult.
Especially given the budget, given the lack
Yeah.
of resources, for sure.
And COVID. I mean, my gosh. Boy, I just kudos to his team. And it's not Scott. I mean, if he didn't, it is him because he's the leader.
Yep.
But he's got unbelievable people there. They are just tremendous.
Right.
They have a get it done in
Right.
mentality. Scott's answer is don't tell me no, tell me yes.
Right.
And let's figure it out.
A lot of that's very similar to what you were talking about with law enforcement officers. It's a calling, it's a duty that they want to be there and serving in a way that's such a selfless attitude in the whole position, the whole thing. And it's just a really inspiring operation.
It is. And Scott, it's a challenge because, the facilities are an issue.
Right.
I mean, we have aging facilities. There's revenue shortfalls, and we just have to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And Scott has really shined in that role and pulling off the largest commutation. I mean,
Right.
the governor pulled it off, but Scott and Steve Bickley, when he was at Pardon and Parole, it's just unbelievable because Scott isn't a guy who wants the credit. He wants the results. And so that's the big deal. For me, it's not a title. I don't want credit. My job is to advance the governor's agenda and deliver results.
That's good.
And I don't care about credit. We got to get her done.
That's awesome.
How are we doing on prison overcrowding these days?
So we obviously we closed one of our privates, which, you know, part of our long-term strategy plan, we want to obviously get out of, which we're slowly getting there. I think we're 49th and 50th, respectively, in male and female incarceration rates per capita in the U.S. when the governor took office, and we're 47th, 48th today. I mean, we're coming down, and our recidivism's going down, and our violent crimes are going down.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle right there.
Piece. So it's not just get them out.
Yep.
We got to track the data. And so one thing we've done that I doubt's ever been done, I mean, we did that, the governor did commutation in November of last year. Well, we've been tracking every month the list of those commutations to know who's coming back and who's not, what's working, what's not working. So the key, I think, from a prison overcrowding, that is a short-term issue. The long-term fix is why the ones that are coming back, they got a second chance, why are they coming back?
Right.
And so we're tracking these people so that when they do come back in the system, which there have been some, unfortunately, that's just life.
Yeah.
We're finding out why so we can fix the why. We've got to get to the underlying root of the problem, and a lot of that's going to be programs. The governor and I and Director Crow went to Angola in Louisiana last November, when Angola, I think 25 years ago, was the bloodiest prison in the world. And today it's one of the role model prisons of how it's to be done. And that was Burl Cain, the warden at the time. And he had a simple mentality. He said, I'll be as nice as you let me be, or as mean as you make me. And that was to the inmates. And he started building a report, doing programs, and they did all these programs, and they started a prison seminary, and things just started turning around. And their auto mechanic program down there is literally the crown jewel across the U.S. And you've got guys that are lifers working in there, but they're doing it, and they know they went through seminary. They're teaching these younger guys that are going to get a second chance. Hey, I don't get that second chance. I've made my bed. Life in Louisiana is your natural life. So they're there. They've been inspired to teach these other young men that they're going to have a second chance. Give yourself a trait so you don't get back here. And so now the ACM, or I think the certification, those mechanic shops, the Toyotas of the world, they're all recruiting all the mechanics from Angola, not out on the street, which is remarkable.
That is amazing.
And so those are the kind of things that we're getting going in Oklahoma. It takes some time, but we're trying to set. It's like building a house. Foundation's the key to everything. You got to get the foundation right.
Talk a little bit about the volunteers, because I know in most of the prisons that we have a huge private citizen volunteer base that comes in. Talk about what your thoughts are there, how successful those programs are. Yeah,
I mean, probably high level. Getting into each one. What's everything, right? There's so many passionate people that want to help. I mean, it's probably what led you here, what led me here. We're all Oklahomans at the end of the day. I share the governor's vision. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. Who wouldn't want to be the top 10 state?
Right.
And that volunteer, that's that Oklahoma standard, in my opinion. You've got people that literally see, and I really do think DOC hit a turning point. The transparency over there is probably like it's never been before. I hear that all the time at the Capitol. They're actually getting things that the legislators are asking for and being transparent and really trying to move the needle. And I think, honestly, on the private sector side, it's attracting people to come be a part of that. And so the more people that want to step up and help, the better. I mean, I just think the more programs, the better. That is one thing that it was just abundantly clear going to Angola is we need more programs, and there's a lot of opportunity out there, and we got to get really good at the programs we do, because that's going to be the key to recidivism. 85% of our prison population is going to be your neighbor, my neighbor someday.
That's right.
Not everybody that's in there is a lifer. That's right. And so we want good neighbors. Right. And the way we're going to have good neighbors is we got to get them the tools to succeed. So when you get out there, they don't get back in.
That's right. At Angola, do they utilize the private sector quite a bit to help out?
Absolutely. Really? Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. So at Angola, they do a lot of the folks down there. They have a prison rodeo that comes in, which, I think we ought to look at doing again down in McAllister as one of the programs. It's a big deal. It's a big draw there, and people come there because – and then the inmates, a lot of them have crafts, skill sets, and they make things, and it's a way for them to make money and sell things. Wow. And that's where the volunteers are all there at Angola. It's a ton of volunteers down there.
That's really cool. Well, real quick, we covered a ton of topics here. We didn't get a chance really to learn more about you. Can you give us just a real quick background. I
Well,
know you have a background in
other than being the sharpest dressed guy, which
That
Secretary
is a
Oster
good
was going
one.
to slap me for saying this, but the
I don't know.
sharpest dressed guy in state government.
I give
Ken
it to you.
Copeland looks pretty good.
I haven't seen Copeland in a while.
I saw Copeland today at the cabinet meeting.
Yeah, looking good.
I was envious. He had a sport coat on that looked good.
All right.
I like clothes.
That's good. That's good. Well, tell us a little bit about your background. Like, how did you get in? Why is law enforcement your passion, or public safety? I guess in more of a generic term.
Well, so my dad started his career, and that's my mentor. My dad started his career and became an FBI agent. And so ever since I was a young boy, I just remember I grew up in Washington, D.C. In the younger years of my life. And my dad worked for President Reagan and President Bush. And at the time he had, in the late 80s, at one point, I think he oversaw all the federal law enforcement. My father did in the late 80s. So I was around a lot of those guys growing up. I mean, all through the 80s. And my dad's prosecutor background, being an FBI agent. So as long as I can remember, I knew I was going to be a Secret Service agent. We moved back to Oklahoma. My father was the 25th governor of the state. And so I got exposed to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol when I was in high school and my dad was governor. And so I thought I was going to go to the Secret Service. At the time, they required an advanced degree. I was ready to get out of college. I graduated in 3 years with a finance degree because I was determined I want to go to work.
Right.
I didn't want to go and get another degree. I wanted to go to work. So I thought, all right, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol is like my second family because I was around them a lot with my parents. So it became a bond that's unexplainable.
That's cool.
And so I said, I'm going to go do that. I graduated in 3 years, went through the 53rd Oklahoma Highway Patrol Academy in May of 2001. I had applied. At that time, I wanted to go to the ATF, and I applied and was kind of in transition. And my brother-in-law started talking to me about commercial real estate. And for whatever reason, I said, well, I'm going to try that before I go in law enforcement and see how it goes. And the rest is kind of history. And I went that route, and it was kind of a hard thing for me because for as long as I've known I want to be a cop and be in law enforcement, I just love that. There's a higher calling for me, and I think I see it now with my foundation. And frankly, I feel blessed the governor has given me an opportunity to be in this position to, help these folks and be a leader for them and an advocate for them. Besides just the foundation work that I thought that was my calling when I set the Troopers Foundation up in 2016. But kind of the rest is history. My day job besides state government is I'm an investment guy, and I have some tech businesses and oil and gas companies that keep me awfully busy. But the most important job is a dad and a husband. And it's shout out to my wife. It's her birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday.
What's your wife's
cool.
name?
Brittany.
Brittany, happy birthday.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Shout out.
We'll give her a
my
good
wife,
shout out.
Brittany.
That's good. I like it.
So we're going to dinner tonight for
Let's
her
go.
birthday, just something quiet. But I mean, honestly, my passion, besides I love to work, and I love getting things done. I like complex problems. But I'm a big outdoors guy. I love land management, and we've got a piece of property outside of Oklahoma City that I spend most of my free time with the family. I just like wildlife management with deer and turkey management. So I do a lot of land management work out at our place. That's kind of my passion.
Man of many
I love
talents.
the
Oh,
wildlife department.
goodness.
I use the wildlife
JD Strong and
department's
those
next door.
guys?
Yeah, I love those guys.
He does it all wearing a nice suit, too. It's pretty
No, I
amazing.
don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you think I'm best dressed. You need to come see me at the ranch on the weekend. You'll go, who is this guy?
I like it. Well, seriously, thank you so much. First
Absolutely.
off, for your passion and your desire for what you do for our state. It's a huge calling, and what you're doing is amazing. So thank you very much. Steve, you got anything to add?
Secretary Keating, thanks for coming. Affectionately known as Chip. He super good guy. So the thing that probably doesn't come across in a lot of these sessions that we do is these people aren't just like here dedicated to the state working tons of hours. They're really good people. I mean, your children should be proud. I'm sure your wife is. We're fortunate to have you here. And I will say this. I got the opportunity to meet your dad at your office one time when I was on board DOC. We had a meeting, and he's a great guy. I mean, just super down to earth. And I swear to God, I think if I saw him right now, I wouldn't remember my name.
Right.
It's been a couple of years, but super good guy.
I had good coaches.
You did.
I have good
I agree with
parents.
that.
I hear
There's
that.
no question.
I hear
But
that
there's
still around the Capitol.
Hey, when duty calls, that's just in my blood. You answer the call, and it doesn't really matter what else is going on. You got to figure it out.
I love that.
I got to laugh.
yeah,
I don't
sure.
know if Austria said this. You know, when the governor asked, some of us are unpaid doing this. It was a 10-hour-a-week deal. You've probably heard the story. Hey, you're only going to work 10 hours a week.
I do
doing
know the
this.
story.
And at first I was believing it. And then I think my wife said, nothing's 10 hours a week. But I started to believe it, and then I got it out of my mind real quickly because, again, I've laughed with the governor. I said, you remember the 10 hours a week? And he grins. And I said, but you can't say no. You just have to figure out how to make it work. But it's not 10 hours a week. It's probably more like 60 hours a week.
It's crazy. I can speak specifically to Secretary Ostro because we partnered up during the unemployment crisis.
Yep.
And I know he was pulling in excess of 70 hours and probably more than that at times. And we're grateful for it because you're not getting paid for that opportunity.
Yep.
Or if you are, it's nothing near the effort that you're putting out. And it's, again, think about it. Energy crisis, health crisis with the pandemic, unemployment crisis, all the social issues, unrest in those spaces, and now we have CARES Act.
Riots, floods.
I
can think of all of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
2 months. It's crazy.
Well, that's the other thing. We didn't even get into that. And I know we're trying to close this thing out, but the truth is, people don't know that at any given day, you can be Secretary Keating and get a call on something going on in the prisons, something going on with our OHP, something going on with a tornado possibly or a flood.
Yep.
You're getting all that at one time sometimes.
A lot of phone calls.
That's
10 hours a week, though, right?
10 hours a week.
Yeah, he gets it all done. That's right.
I love it, though.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
100%.
guys.
And-
Hey, but likewise to you all. I mean, it's just awesome people everywhere.
Well,
Gotta have get her done guys.
That's right.
And gals.
And we didn't get to, we did just scratching the surface here. We want to have you back on at some
Absolutely.
point just to get an update. I mean, there's ongoing Real ID updates, prison updates, things like that we just really want to stay in touch, have you back on the show to stay updated on that.
Anytime is my honor.
Love it,
Thank
love
you,
it, love
sir.
it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, guys.
Well, hey, thanks again for coming on. But thank you so much for listening at home. I hope you learned a little bit about what CHIP does for our state, and it really is just an amazing thing that he and the rest of our secretaries do for Oklahomans. Anyways, thanks for listening, and stay tuned. We'll be back with another episode soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.